Welcome back to another episode of the Ziza Connection. We have my sister on this episode. Say hi.
Hi, I'm the sister. My name is Pegah.
What do you do?
I'm currently a student at Midwestern University in Glendale. I do a lot. I'm in the lab right now studying oncology. I'd like to go into neurology one day. So, currently very busy.
You used to write poetry?
I still do, actually. I wrote one pretty recently about all the protests and everything that's going on, but I just don't get to do as much as
You don't really post them or anything anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I actually write a lot of it. I just don't post as much.
That's fair.
Okay,
so tradition, I'm going to ask you 3 random questions from a random question generator.
Okay.
So they're completely out of the blue.
Cool.
First one, if you were required to have a job of some type, but you didn't need the money from it to survive, what job would you choose?
Definitely like a philosopher.
Okay.
Yeah. Like a world traveling philosopher.
I don't know if that's a job.
It is. I feel like people travel the world to eat food. Why can't I travel the world and just talk to people?
That's fair. Right? I'll take that. Okay,
yeah.
Next one. What recent thing have you decided that you're completely over and done with?
Expectations and disappointment.
In what respect?
Of people.
Because of this situation specifically, or?
No, it's something I feel like has affected me like a lot in my life.
Okay.
And it's something that I notice over time. It brings me unnecessary stress. It's something I've seen affect other people very close to me.
I have a few people in mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right, it's work in progress though, because it's really hard for me. I'm a kind of person who just has expectations.
Right.
That are high.
Right. Fair enough. Okay. Next one. Who is someone you recently thought about that you haven't seen or talked to in years?
Ooh.
Who have you not seen or talked to in years that came to thought recently? And I'm going to spice it up. Why?
Why?
What was like the trigger thought? Not necessarily why were you thinking about them, but what was the thought process leading up to it?
It was a really old elementary school friend.
Okay.
And I was thinking of the first time I ever said a curse word, like in public. I was at elementary school and I don't know, it was maybe, like 2nd or 3rd grade, which I know is so late for people these days. But
right.
I heard her say, "Can I curse here?"
Yeah, I don't give a fuck.
I heard her say ass and I was like, oh, are we doing that
that's
now?
Not even a curse
cool.
word.
I mean, but for me it was.
I know, I get it.
Back then. I mean, I know kids come out like saying everything these days, but for me it was a big deal. I don't know. It just came up to me and I was like, oh, I hope she's good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So why are you here today? Why did we decided to do this because we were talking about quantum physics, to say the least.
Yeah.
Would you say that's the general topic correctly, or were we talking about something else?
I think quantum everything, because as far as the physics is concerned, I don't like the math portion of it. I don't even like
the theory of
the
it.
physics of it.
Right.
But yeah, what we would call maybe quantum consciousness or mysticism, or just everything that is built upon the theory of quantum physics. Something that's very interesting to me. So maybe more of a departure from like what I study and more so what we like to talk about.
Okay. This is a topic that very few people are going to understand to begin with, because it's just not available to people. It's not something that people are generally like looking to get into, nor does it present an opportunity for people to get into it.
I agree.
Where can you give me give me the elevator pitch on quantum everything? What is
like
the
for
idea?
Dummies version?
Yeah.
Well, that in itself is complicated, so we'll try to dumb it down a little bit. We all pretty much grew up on Newtonian physics, meaning, gravity and the laws of matter, and everybody was pretty kosher with that for the better part of our entire species, right?
Matter doesn't get destroyed, it only changes.
Yeah. Like this is the physical world. You live based off of empirical data. You have to touch something physically to affect it too. So like two atoms. So atoms make up everything. Mm-hmm. Every kind of material in the universe is made up of atoms at pretty much the small. I mean, you can go smaller than that, but we'll just stick to atoms here. under Newtonian physics, which is what we're all taught in school, two atoms have to touch physically for them to affect one another.
Okay.
But Einstein was the one to kind of refute all of that. And he ushered in the wave of what we call quantum physics now. And a lot of people don't like that.
Why not?
Because like most things, which is kind of funny that it affects us now, like most things, when you want to try to change what is commonly accepted and known in the world, you're gonna hit some roadblocks and people who don't like it and people who don't want to believe it or people who won't even give it a chance.
Are you talking about the general public or are you talking about like science?
Both.
Like, okay.
Yeah. There are, in the science realm, at least, there are people who are on both sides of, this problem.
Right.
Really. People who agree with it and say, well, yeah, Einstein's right. And they think that it merits more understanding and more, research.
Okay.
And then there are people who say, well, sure, relativity is true, but all the other theories that go about it, like, that's nonsense. There's no way that can work because they believe that you have to have physical materialism in order for anything to exist.
And quantum physics is saying what in relation to that?
It's saying that you can affect matter without physiological touch.
So all the entrepreneurs that are talking about like your energy affects things, that's
sure.
That's science behind what they're trying to empower you to do.
Yeah, they're taking like the quantum physics laws and theories and they're applying it to real life psychological, philosophical situations. And a lot of people don't like that either.
Why not? For the same reason?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Exactly.
Okay, so...
They don't think it's real.
So what proof is there that quantum mechanics, quantum whatever, what proof is there that it actually exists or that matter operates that way or things work like that?
So I think a lot of people are familiar with CERN, the Large Hadron Collider.
Okay.
It was in that Da Vinci Code movie, Dan Brown.
Okay.
So I love those books and I'm obsessed with almost all the movies, but I'm just a huge fan.
Is that Angels and Demons too?
Yeah,
that was the same one? Okay.
Da Vinci Code.
That was the movie
Symbol.
I liked. I liked Angels and Demons more.
Yeah. So I think it was in the Da Vinci Code, he talks about CERN and the Large Hadron Collider, and where they showed that you can break up atoms and have them make an impact and affect each other from far away. So it's called spooky action at a distance. It's something that the early quantum theorists kind of devised through, and everything about this is based on math, So there is hard empirical data to prove that quantum physics exists. And quantum physics really affects the microcosm of the universe. So everything from the atom plane and below.
Okay.
What's, pushing it for people is taking those ideologies and applying them, like you said,
to like real life.
To real life and thought and positivity and consciousness and stuff like that.
That's my other question. What implications does the belief in or the system of quantum physics or quantum mechanics, what implications are there to like real life outside of, so obviously that's one of the implications. What others are there?
Well, I mean,
and why should we care?
Well, I think you can agree because we grew up in the same household,
right?
That we didn't grow up with any real kind of rigid structural belief system, right?
Right. Albeit religious or anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, our parents pretty much said, believe what you want, just don't be crazy about it.
Don't be a jackass about anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Just be a good person, have your morals, but even someone who says that they're an atheist,
right?
They believe in something, and that something being nothing, right?
Right.
To me, who is a believer, what I would call an idealist, I'd call myself an idealist probably.
Which means
that I think that the physical material world stems from a collective consciousness.
Okay.
And that you know, we do have within us the power to influence our lives and the physical world around us because we created it in the first place.
And that's, you're saying the power scientifically.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And that pretty much everything we perceive is based off of our expectations of what the physiological world is supposed to act like. You know, every theory, like all the laws of nature, for example, wouldn't exist unless we had done the math for them in the first place. And it makes some scientists wonder, were the laws of nature there first? Or
did we create
through mathematical formulation?
Okay.
Did we create the natural order of things around us?
Right.
And I know it sounds super freaky and weird and just completely out there.
It's like saying we came from this direction, but what if we had come from this direction? Would we get the same result?
Or like, what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing, you know? And there's a lot of speculation about that kind of stuff, but I think that's what makes it fun. And at least for me, applying quantum physics or quantum theories to my real life and to my own psychology and to my own emotional, you know, health is far more of a positive impact than any religious standing that I have ever come across with. And I've read about a lot of them.
Right.
I've kind of gone through my motions throughout my life of, what do I believe? Do I believe this and that? And I
remember you were like, you were Buddhist for a second, you were Christian for a second.
I was Christian for a minute.
You were Christian for a minute.
Yeah,
I remember you going through your I don't want to call them phases, but like your motions.
Well, you know, and I think every person, I mean, I certainly benefited greatly from having the freedom to do that. And I do think, again, that stems from our family being so open-minded about just letting us believe whatever we want.
Yeah, Mom and Dad really did not care.
Well, you know, and I do
like
think
at any point in time when you were experimenting, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's cultural too. You know, they escaped from a country with religious persecution and oppression.
Right.
And so from their standpoint,
why would they impose the same kind of...
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and... You know, I always grew up thinking, well, all of this is man-made anyways. So, you know, who is any one person to say this is right over this? And everybody's, you know, free to their interpretation of what they believe. I think that's what makes it amazing. It's when it gets, you know, political and socioeconomic that it becomes detrimental.
Okay.
But to me, quantum theory, quantum metaphysics, quantum consciousness is a beautiful juxtaposition from all of that. It takes what we know about the world and what we're figuring out through scientific breakthroughs and differing technologies, staying open-minded about the fact that these things can change and that, you know, we're okay with that. We're okay with knowing that something I might think is a physical fact right now could change 50 years from now.
Right.
I mean, 100 years ago, people unequivocally knew, quote unquote, that the world was flat and that the earth was the center of the universe. You know, there was no refuting that.
We had no concept of what was in the ocean 100 years ago either. So.
Yeah. So really, again, kind of like that quantum theory states, your understanding of the world around you is really based on your perception of it and the breadth and depth of what we're able to even conceive about it at this time. You know, you read about animals that can see or hear at different wavelengths of light and sound. Their perception of the world is completely different from ours. So who are we to say that theirs is wrong?
Right.
Or right?
Right.
They just see and understand things at a different plane. And I think that's perfectly reasonable and plausible, you know?
That's interesting on the sound side of it.
Yeah. I know.
To think that certain animals can hear things that may be going on that you can't hear.
Yeah, and I mean,
is,
you know,
bizarre.
You're getting into like supernatural kind of stuff now, but it does posit the theory that if you think that the world around you can be affected by experience and thought and energy,
right,
and influence and expectation and positivity, that those things don't become so crazy after a while, you know?
So on the medical side of it, the human body has an electric, it has some sort of electric power to it. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, the brain generates electricity. If you remember from The Matrix, one of our favorite trilogies.
Yeah. Fourth one coming soon.
I know. Oh my gosh.
So then that's the question then for quantum mechanics or physics, is where does that energy go? Or is there a common understanding of what happens?
It goes beyond that. It goes beyond the physical world material, which electricity is.
Okay,
physical and material.
So let's double back then.
Yeah.
What happens to the energy that the brain and the body create?
Well, it depends on what you believe that where you believe that energy came from. Obviously, there is a physiological component.
Is there a medical understanding of it?
Yes, there is. The things I talk about, I would not necessarily apply to a future practice or my scientific research right now, for example.
Right.
I have
what
to
is
base...
that? What is that general understanding based around the community that you've seen?
It's still up in the air.
Okay.
It's still definitely up in the air. We have to base our medicine and our healthcare system and, again, like treatments, medications, protocols, diagnoses that we give to patients. We have to base that off of hard empirical evidence because this is still such a new frontier. But I believe that it is a frontier worth looking into and not just pushing by the wayside, calling it a pseudoscience because you can't physically prove it through empirical data. That's kind of the roadblock that this whole quantum consciousness theory, mechanics, physics runs into at this point, is our tools and our technology can only take us so far right now,
Right.
We live in a physical world. Those are the laws that we are governed by. But I do believe that there's a whole nother aspect to it that theory covers. And, when it comes to me hopefully treating patients one day, I will most definitely base my practice on that physiological approach. But I also do think it would be interesting to, show and condone the use of your own mentality over things too, especially with my wanting to go into neurology, for example. And one of the really great things about Midwestern is we have a One Health approach to our system. So,
which means what? So I'm going to have someone who's from Rush Medical College on in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So is that like a normal thing for most medical colleges as well?
I don't know if Rush has it. The One Health initiative goes across many different fields. So it takes, dental, medical, and even veterinary medicine. Mm-hmm. And the underlying basis for it says that, we're here to understand every kind of process about our patient. We want to know how they feel, what they think. It's not just about the body, the organ system anymore.
Gotcha.
It's paying attention to the emotional and mental well-being and health of our patients while still treating them for physical diseases. And I've always been a big fan of that approach first. I personally believe that a lot of physical and physiological trauma and disease stems from emotional and psychological trauma.
I would agree. Me being a communication major and into psychology and all that, I would agree 100%. But that also sounds like it takes a lot more work for each doctor.
And it definitely does.
I'm being a realist here. I don't think that's something that would catch on based on the state of our healthcare system at the moment.
I agree with you 100%. I know for a fact that our healthcare system does not push forth that kind of ideology. It's too costly.
Right.
It's too good. I feel like
it's the same with the school system too. Like you keep shoving kids in a classroom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So same kind of idea, but a much bigger playing field. You're playing for a lot more when you're doing it in medicine. When
it's just like anything else. To me, healthcare is not a business conglomerate. To me, it's a way of life. And unfortunately, when you take something and you turn it into a cash cow, like healthcare has become in this country, for example, it pushes a lot of physicians and doctors who really do truly want to help their patients to have to say, oh, well, my quota today, I have to see 30 patients. I am here from 9 to 5. That gives me, 15 minutes per patient. What can you really do for a patient in 15 minutes?
Yeah.
That's why in my opinion, big pharma is as big as it is. And there's a lot of issue I have with that too. I think, for my practice in the future, I would certainly want to have that be on the back end of how I would want to treat patients. And it really is why I'm kind of erring on the side of having my own private practice, because it would give me more control.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
So from a doctoral perspective, having your own practice means you have a little bit more control over how you see your patients, how many you see, what you do. Obviously, like keeping in mind from a business perspective, which is my thing, making sure you're meeting a bottom line at minimum, having some sort of profit system there, because you can't practice if you're not profiting. Is that at all possible? So like hospitals in my mind are only there for people who need surgery. That's in my mind. That's the way it works for me.
Yeah, it should be.
Okay. Is privatized surgery systems, is that like feasible in your mind at all?
Well, I do think that's already a thing. I mean, surgery is not going to be a specialty that I think I'm going to go into. I don't think that's for me.
Right.
But then you have insurance coming into play, and the costs of private surgeons, and that can be really difficult for patients. It's just tough.
And I'm sure insurance companies don't want to pay for that either. Okay.
Yeah, I have friends of mine in the program who we always joke around saying, well, we're going to all these years of school, paying all this money. We don't think we're going to make that much money out of it because, I'm proud to say there are a lot of us in the field coming up, especially with everything that's gone on lately, who really want to make it a point to, kind of change the face of healthcare and not have it be so business driven as much as it is bring it back to the person,
I can say I can feel that. I feel that with the few people I know who are in med school too, like Niyai, who's going to be on the podcast, like I said, he's also one of those people that I feel like really does it for the love of it.
Yeah. And
because he feels like he wants to do it because he has some sort of an effect to have on it long term. Do the teachers help push that kind of a thing?
So I went to ASU before, humongous campus, as you know, and I was really positively affected by a couple of professors there. There were times in my life where I didn't think I could do this. I hit a lot of roadblocks and issues of my own. There was a long time where I was like, this dream of mine is dead,
right.
And it took me a while to kind of pull myself back up and say, you know what, you have to give this a chance. And when I got into Midwestern's program, I absolutely fell in love with the faculty there. They really have this open door policy. You can go in, sit down on a couch in pretty much any professor's office and just talk, chat, say how you're feeling, what's going on. You can talk about other courses to other course professors. They really want to get to know you. Even throughout this whole COVID-19 issue, they have been, hugely communicating with us. It was really nice to hear from one of my new professors for this term that, he's like, I see you and you're doing great and I'm really proud of you. And,
right.
Those things matter. It's especially when you've committed your life to being pretty much, a lifelong student and going through this kind of tumultuous time. It's nice to see that the faculty really do care as much as they do at my school. So I am very happy where I'm at.
I honestly wouldn't have. It's weird that you say that you went through that tough time when you thought you weren't able to do it, because from my perspective, being your brother, I just thought you were being lazy and didn't want to do it yet.
Oh, well,
that was how I was always sitting there like she can do it. She knows she can do it. She just doesn't want to yet.
I think, and again, you'll understand too, because I think there's a lot of that within you too, is we kind of like to go through our personal issues personally
100%.
and privately.
Right.
It's not something that I wanted to make, widely known. But as you know, there were some personal issues I went through in my life, and it really tore me down. And it affected me educationally in a negative way, to where I wasn't sure if I could bounce back. It was that bad for me. And I I was depressed for a long time, and I wasn't confident in myself. And I can 100% with certainty say the person I am right now, I don't even understand who I was 5 years ago.
Right.
I don't even know who that was.
Right. I didn't know who that was either.
Yeah. I think it's really important to be able to say that in your life. If you look back at yourself even a year from now, and say, oh, well, yeah, I'm still the same. Like I'm good. I know everything and I'm solid. I don't know about that. I think, that's why I do love science so much, because it changes all the time. It ebbs and flows, like, to me, the human experience should, and you should be open to it. You should not be resistant to change.
That doesn't sound like something that most people are familiar with, the idea of science being something that ebbs and flows, because to most, the idea of science is that we know exactly what we know, and that's why it's science.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, it's funny because that was actually a topic in one of our ethics classes last week, was what do we consider quote unquote real science and not? Is there a hierarchy of science? Because, right now I'm in the meat and potatoes of my thesis work, for example, and I have to base that work off of real quote unquote hard science. And people, when they think of that, they think of math, physics, chemistry, biology. But, you have to understand those things weren't hard science once. They were based off of theories and, again, the physical world, the empirical world. There's a whole nother subset that this empirical world is made off of, at least I believe so. And it's important to acknowledge that, yes, you want to have some foundational understanding of science. Like, for example, gravity. We're pretty good with gravity.
Right.
But aside from a lot of that, you want to have a really big and open and wide and arms open kind of approach, in my opinion, to everything in life, including science. Because otherwise you're kind of missing out on a lot. And I think that's something that definitely was pushed in our family, for sure, was to always, reach for more knowledge and more information and, never stop trying to spark interest in things, whatever that thing may be. And,
right.
I think you and I have found our own separate interests, and we've found interests that we share in common too.
True.
But it's important to not say, okay, well, I know enough about this subject. Now I'm good. I don't need to worry about it anymore. And to me, that's kind of what religion does to people, Right. It tells you that here are a set, defined, rule book pretty much for your life. And this is how things work. And you're good. As long as you follow these rules and regulations. And, politics does that to people.
Right.
It boxes you in.
Right.
And it tells you what you are and are not allowed to think, feel, act, say, do.
Arguably, that's any moral belief system.
Sure.
I would argue that a political belief system is the same as a religious belief system or a moral belief system.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of built into a system of politics in its own.
Yeah.
So then from a neurology perspective, from your perspective and what you know, how exactly does someone teach themselves that it's okay to question what they quote unquote know?
Well, I can only speak from experience and say that it's kind of always been in me. My mom, our mom, used to call me Curious George when I was a kid, because I would literally ask a bajillion questions. And I do think, this goes back to the environment I was in. I was allowed to
ask questions.
I was encouraged to ask questions. Our dad wanted to show us everything and teach us everything.
Still to this day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Another belief I have is that a lot of things start at home from childhood.
I would agree.
So I do think it's a generational situation for sure, that I hope that, our generations can definitely push forward with everything we're going through, is to, give your children and yourself room to grow and explore and understand more things about yourself, and understand that, you and the world around you and the experiences around you, the people around you, they all are connected to one another. They all affect one another. How you feel affects other people. You just have that feeling. You can't help but, understand, hey, there's something wrong with you, for example, or I'm getting this weird vibe. People talk about all these kind of hippie, new agey terms, but when you kind of pull it back and look into what it means at a quantum level, for example, there's some real evidence towards it. Mm-hmm. So it's all tied together, in my opinion.
Well, I would argue too, saying that everything starts at home. It was a lot easier 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago to shelter your child as they were growing up. The internet didn't exist. Television wasn't as easily accessible. Maybe not 30 years ago, but you get the point. So given the fact that there's so much more opportunity for exposure to new things, like getting on, any 7-year-old knows how to use the internet today. Yeah. So you're exposed to a lot more. So I feel like you're prone to asking more questions because of that exposure.
Sure. So
then the issue would become, are parents willing to talk to their kids?
Sure. And, I do think that's a double-edged sword too. You have almost this overindulgence of information. You don't know what's real, what's not real, what's right, what's wrong, what's fact, and what's not. And I think it's important to, teach your kids to use the internet and information they come to with an objective mind first, and then make it subjective. So say, what source is this coming from?
Teaching kids how to source things would be an incredible improvement on society, I think.
Yeah. Was this some comment that somebody made on Twitter, or where did it come from?
Who's the person that wrote this? Who studied this? How'd the study happen? Being able to understand where the information came from. Right.
Yeah. Is it reputable to some degree or not? Or is it just an opinion? And opinions are fine too, but you have to know that that's an opinion.
You have to have a basis for your opinion too.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's fine for you to base your life on opinions, but just understand that you should be open to interpretation and change as such if you're basing your life and your beliefs on opinions, and not facts. And I think that's another interesting thing we've kind of turned around on is I think a lot of people base their life values and morals on other people's opinions and not so much on maybe what even they think. I don't know if a lot of people, including myself, until maybe more recently, knew what they thought about themselves and the way they want to live their life outside of others.
I think that's the part of being you, though, is the fact that you shouldn't ever really know who you are, or it doubles back to what we were talking about 5 minutes ago, where you don't really ever know who you are. Or what you stand for. And once you do, you're getting complacent. And once you're complacent, you're not really giving yourself a chance to grow anymore.
Sure. And I know I've heard from other people, oh, well, that's so tiring. And you should have a foundation, a basis, a strong, I'm sitting on this is me.
I have one. It's 3 phrases, and you know what those 3 phrases are. And that's a very easy way to live life by, but it also gives a lot of room to grow on. And for those listening that don't know, because obviously I'm talking to my sister, it's good words, good thoughts, good deeds.
Right.
So if you're capable of building a base level system like that, that's super, super general, but also has good intentions built into it, good words, good thoughts, good deeds, all good intentions, then that gives you an opportunity to have some sort of a foundation for the rest of your moral thoughts or your moral being, or whatever you want to build it on.
Yeah, because I do think that as a species, we do have to have some crux to build our lives upon.
Right.
Evolutionarily, from the dawn of, thinking man, we tried to figure out how the universe around us worked and why are we here? What are we doing? What is this all about? What's our purpose? So I do think that's at the heart of us. And I mean, you want to pull that back to universal consciousness or God or whatever you want to call it, be my guest. That's fine. But it is an interesting aspect to note that I don't think we can live fulfilled lives without that foundation and that purpose to some degree. I think people kind of maybe overplay it when that's where you get into the politics and the religion and the subcultures of everything that kind of become control at that point. But, like you said, good words, good thoughts, good deeds, that is a belief system. I think everybody has to have something.
Right.
I just think that the more fluid that something is, the more you benefit from understanding about yourself and
experience
people around
in
you.
general.
And not being, afraid to experience things.
Right.
Not being offended by experiences and other things.
Right.
Because that's another issue I see a lot of times, I feel like, is, everybody's offended or doesn't want to take things the right way or, uses things against other people. I mean, I think...
Or even against themselves in a lot of situations.
I mean, it's so prevalent. It's just something that's hitting home right now is, this movement we're talking about. It's a civil rights movement. And it is... being somebody who believes wholeheartedly in the ability of people to change and, be one with one another, it's preposterous to me that people still exist who would question, any other person as being equal or worthy over another one. I just think it's insane.
Right.
I think it's ridiculous that we still have to have these conversations. And, it's funny, we look at ourselves as such a civilized and technologically advanced, civilization.
Right.
And I would venture to say that a lot of the technological advancements have pushed us back a lot when it comes to our mental, emotional, psychological, philosophical well-beings. And I mean, why can't we balance the two out?
Okay. So what do you think about the systems? Everyone talks about the system working against people to suppress those kinds of things in the first place. Do you think that's true, or do you think we've just technologically pushed ourselves in a place that we don't understand? Like, I feel like technology moved too fast for anyone to understand what the effects would be. Sure. And now we're seeing those effects little by little. But do you think those effects were intentional from some group that no one knows about, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call it?
I think it's both. I think from the time when people had to go from hunter-gatherer, nomadic kind of plains living species to becoming
sedentary,
with cities and towns and structure and basis, there had to be a form of control over people.
Right.
And from that, it stemmed this ideology that we have to keep the masses down in order to, again, control. I can't think of a better word right now, but control them. You cannot...
Like neutralize, maybe. I don't know.
You can't have a obedient society if you allow that society to think and feel and be whatever they want. I think one of the big examples that comes into my mind is, and this is a controversial topic, but the psychedelic movement back in the 60s and 70s. So,
which we see as a big thing now, too. I feel like in the last 5 years, more psychedelics have been used than in the last 20 years combined.
So, from a non-professional point of view, I do believe that psychedelic therapy, assisted, of course, is amazing for patients who have undergone PTSD, who have anxiety disorders, who have depression. And again, this is empirical, hard evidence.
This is like there are like legal testings and things that have gone on to show this.
Yes,
okay.
And there are a couple cities in the United States over the past couple of years, like you said, who have been legally funding research and then decriminalizing the use of certain psychedelic substances.
Like what?
Like psilocybin.
Okay, which is mushrooms. Magic mushrooms.
Yes,
okay.
There's assisted federal LSD therapy for, military personnel, for example.
What about MDMA, and, like Molly and stuff?
Yes, they have seen that as well for people with anxiety and other kinds of disorders. And the honest truth is those psychedelic therapies are much, much better in terms of any kind of morbidity or disease or...
So in layman's terms, safer.
Much
in layman's
safer,
terms. Okay.
Much safer than most pharmaceutical drugs that would be given to the same patients. You have far, far, far less side effects with, again, assisted therapies of psychedelics than you do with the pharmaceutical grade medications that they're given. Now, to my knowledge, there is a small portion of the population that would want to stay away from psychedelic use because it can trigger certain type of psychosocial issues. It can almost kind of awaken certain repressed problems in the brain. So it should be done with proper use,
right, with
not
guidance.
as like a party drug, so to speak.
Right.
But, back to our previous conversation, back in the 60s and 70s when these substances were first being discovered, accidentally, mind you, that was right when we were, in the brink of war in the United States, Cold War. And
awkward that those two times coincided.
And so the whole hippie movement kind of came to fruition. And most of those people were very much against the war movement in the United States. And a lot of people would speculate that that was because of their regular use of psychedelics. And these psychedelics were able to shut off what we call the default mode network in the brain. So pretty much most of your daily life, you're on autopilot. You think the same things you got to think. You go through your motions. And those are the parts of your brain that you use. They're firing constantly, and that's just who you are.
Super strong neural connections and those things.
Yeah. Your everyday brain.
Right.
When you're on psychedelics, you start seeing neuronal activity in other parts of the brain that usually wouldn't be so awakened. And your everyday brain, your ego brain, so to speak, who you think you are and who you are to the world outside of you,
right,
kind of turns off for a little while. And they call it kind of an ego deflating experience. A lot of people, they say that when they're on psychedelics, they feel at one with God and nature and other people. And they have, these experiences that change their entire perspective of life.
Right. You
have people who were staunch atheists, for example, who say, well, I'm not going to say what I think something like God is, but I know there's something.
Right.
They come from one dosage. Mm-hmm. They completely change their perspective on the world. And that was a problem for Cold War America because you had these drones, these populations of people who were believing in each other and understanding that there is no place for discrimination, racism, hatred, bigotry, war,
or at least they didn't understand like a reason for it.
Yeah, because they had quite literally kind of transcended those ideologies, and
they're like, there's bigger shit to worry about.
Not even worry about, but to celebrate each other.
Okay.
And what unites us at the most common basis, mm-hmm. which again comes back to quantum theory. So it all kind of ties together. And from that Cold War era where psychedelics were very prevalent and they were, in my opinion, the political system at large was saying that there was a huge backlash against any of their, agendas. They demonized psychedelic substances and they made them
for that purpose because it was.
Yeah. They federally, cut off psychedelic substances, made them illegal.
Right. Class 1.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Class 1. Yeah.
Yeah, it's some class, and it's ridiculous to me again because you have a world by and large where substances that have been again empirically proven to increase the neuronal input and output of patients with severe psychological issues, and to just overall really has a very positive effect on most people. Those are the illegal ones, right? And then we live in a country where things like alcohol and nicotine are rampant.
Right. There's tons of psychologists and clinical psychologists who will even talk about the use of alcohol and like how ridiculously damaging it can be even in small amounts of regular use.
Yes. So, I mean, again, all hard evidence that points to alcohol, nicotine, and a lot of big pharma medications that have incredibly disastrous side effects for the population at large. But why are they allowed? Because they are backed by the government. It's money, it's power, it's control, you know? And in my opinion, to a degree, the destruction of a population by its own population kind of gives this checks and balances effect for the powers at large to say, okay, well, we got this under control. We just keep feeding them what keeps them down and they'll be fine.
Yeah, even going down to food, like quite honestly, the food that's
100%. 100%. And I've taken it upon myself to kind of educate myself more about the foods that I want to put in my body. That's something else that, you know, my school really does, you know, push forward a lot is nutritional health, and understanding what things like red meat, for example, do to you, and refined processed sugars.
Dude, just stop eating fast food for a week and see how much better you feel. Yeah. But then again, you go into the political side of it where like some people really can't afford to be eating food that's not bad, you know.
And that's what it's control.
Yeah, no, of course.
And sugar is more, what is the word I'm looking for?
Craveable?
More, I know I'm blanking, but sugar is more craveable.
Addictive?
Yes, exactly. Sugar is more addicting than cocaine is. Proven. It's insane. If you give, in the studies that I have read, you give a rat the option between sugar and cocaine, and it will want the sugar. It would rather die than not have the sugar again. That's insane to me. And from a medical standpoint, you know, you have this entire gut microbiome, what a lot of people in the health field call the second brain, is your gut. You have this connection between all the things in the ecosystem that live in, you know, your GI tract, the microbiome, that kind of regulate what goes on with how you think and how you feel in a lot of parts more than your thoughts do, and they can influence your thoughts too. So what you eat quite literally has a huge effect on how you feel and how you think.
So what's been the biggest effect on your like dietary effect that you've had? So what's made the biggest effect?
So I mean, my schedule is like crazy.
Right.
But I think less is more is a really good approach for me. I like to intermittent fast.
Because you've gone through the ringer with different diets and stuff like that too. So.
Yeah. We kind of, you know, we got screwed a little bit genetically.
Yeah.
Dad has like
GI issues. Yeah, right.
But in hindsight, I'm kind of thankful because it did narrow down my list of do's and don'ts when it comes to food, right? I do like to stay away from dairy. Human beings were never really meant to process the milk byproduct of other species. I just think it's weird.
Nut milks?
Nuts fine. It's not animal. It's not an animal byproduct. And most of us lack the proper enzymes to even properly digest
dairy products. Right.
Now, don't get me wrong. I still have pizza sometimes. Like I'll get my cheese in when I can afford to.
Right.
But by and large, I avoid dairy. And I do not eat red meat or chicken or poultry, for example.
Why not chicken?
I just don't like chicken very much, to be honest.
So there's no reason.
And I mean, they're pumped so full of antibiotics and steroids. I mean, pretty much any animal byproduct you eat these days, unless you pretty much went to the farm and killed it yourself, it has something in it. And, you know, we don't live in a world where we go and hunt for our own animals anymore. If that were the case, maybe I'd be a little more prone to wanting to eat animals.
Okay, again. So then what are your main sources of like protein and carb and fats.
Yeah, so I do still eat seafood. In a perfect world for me, I would give that up too, but I'm working on it. And
so you want to be vegan?
Ideally, that would be great. And I do take supplementation to make sure that I'm getting the proper B vitamin and iron in too. But that's the thing. A lot of green leafy vegetables, legumes, nuts, and seeds have enough iron and B vitamins to sustain you more than red meat does. People always say, oh, but I have to get my red meat in, right?
Right.
To get enough iron. I'm anemic, or I have this problem. I need the iron. You can get enough iron from enough leafy greens. It's just like you were saying earlier.
Probably save money doing so.
Well, if you live in the right places, yes. But you have food deserts in a lot of places throughout the country where it's just not offered. Culturally, there's a lot of cultural aspect to this. Our uncle, for example, was scolding me for not eating red meat anymore. And he thought I was going to get too skinny and frail and die if I didn't eat red meat. And, there's a lot of cultural backlash with it too. And for me, quite personally, from a moral standpoint, I don't really want to be eating animals either. Because if you are a believer in this, whole quantum reality kind of theory, consciousness ideology,
right?
You understand that if you're ingesting something that's had a negative impact, let's say the chicken that died of unnatural causes after it was stuffed into a chicken farm and it couldn't move and it couldn't, live,
right?
And it was just horribly killed, and you're ingesting that, byproduct. How is it negatively affecting your body? And I know, again, we're kind of getting into the woo-woo zone a little bit, but I don't think it's something bad to contemplate and, think about, even if it hasn't been empirically proven yet,
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're generally going to try to go vegan?
Yeah. And, healthy fats.
So for people who
greens.
don't want to go vegan, because there are tons of people who don't want to go vegan.
Oh, for sure. I know.
The majority of people, I would say, are against going vegan.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I know it's hard. It's hard for me, too. That's why I haven't done it.
Right.
But I would just maybe eat more raw, fruits and vegetables and legumes. Don't eat overly processed food, like you said. I like intermittent fasting because you don't have this huge spike insulin, glucose kind of roller coaster going on in your body 7 times a day. I know, and that's subjective to whether or not you have certain disorders or not. Like, you have to be very, very cautious about what you say about diet because, for example, if you have diabetes or hypertension, you can't do a lot of these things. And again, disclaimer, talk to your doctor about these things. But I'm not diabetic. I'm not hypertensive. I'm otherwise, thankfully, healthy. And as such, what works best for my body is that I don't like to spike my system with insulin and then have a sugar crash every time I eat a snack. We used to be told you have to have like 7 meals a day, right? That doesn't work for me. I don't eat till noon. I pretty much just have water up until noon. I have usually a big salad with a lot of different colors in there. They always say, the more colors you have in your food, the healthier it is for you.
Right.
And we're not talking about Skittles.
Okay.
And then I'll have a snack if I can get one in, and then I'll have dinner. But I get enough calories in to not be under, because I'm not trying to, push forward like a don't eat kind of agenda either. It's very important to get enough fats and calories and carbs for your brain and your body to properly function too. It's just that I notice that I crash hard the more times a day I eat. And if I eat later in the day, I wake up hungrier in the morning. So I like to kind of cut myself off at around 8 o'clock for dinner.
Okay.
And water.
What has that done for your body composition or your weight?
Well, I've been going through some hormonal things, as a woman who's growing older. But I will say I feel more alert. I feel less lethargic. Being in the program I'm in, I can't afford to be tired and not wake up on time. And have brain fog. I just can't.
I get that, but a lot of people care more about what they look like.
Sure. Yes.
So how has that affected how you look?
Yes. Well, as a woman, I think most of us can say that 75% of how we look comes from what we eat and less from our physical exercise. Now, it's not to say that physical exercise is not important. It 100% is. I don't think you should have one without the other. Am I getting enough physical exercise right now? No.
Okay.
But I do feel better knowing that I at least am taking care of my diet for the most part.
Right.
And I'll work in the physical exercise when I can.
Right.
Yeah. But women tend to hold a lot of their fat, for example, in the middle and lower extremities. And the diet has a big effect on that. You don't want to have fat surrounding your organs.
Right. Makes it harder for them to work. Yeah.
Exactly.
Of course.
So, it just comes down to thinking about, 75, 80% of the time, what am I eating? Is this doing anything good for me? And man, if you're going out, you want to have a pizza, some chocolate, candy. If I'm craving something, I'll have it. I do not believe in, completely cutting myself off. But I do think it's important to just balance it out and err more on the side of healthy and less not.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Cool. That's all the questions I have for you. We're sitting right about an hour.
Awesome.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to talk about? Any outstanding topics or any ideas that are still on the top of your head that you didn't get to talk about that you want to talk about?
Gosh, I mean, there's always something to talk about, I
agree.
like. But we covered a whole gamut of things. And I think something that's just important to keep in mind these days is think for yourself, always challenge yourself. If you're in a rut right now, that's okay. Work through it. Just be open to change and opportunity and potential in your life. And yeah, go against the grain, really, is what I think is best. And don't ever think that you know everything, or that somebody who told you something knows everything about that. Question your reality, question everything. And I think it opens you to a world of a lot of possibility and interest and imagination. And, to me, what is the point otherwise?
I mean, it opens you up to a very unstable place, but also...
But see,
very beneficial. I
think unlike most, and I think you agree with me, we're kind of weird in the fact that we relish in that instability.
Oh, yeah.
We kind of love that zone where we're not sure what something is. I mean, I live for topics that science can't explain yet. I think it's so amazing to not know and to be able to ponder and wonder and see what could happen. And I am always just waiting to maybe read or see the next thing about how it changed.
The next development. Right.
Yeah. I don't really like sitting in you know this now and you're fine. And I think a lot of people do. I know a lot of people base a lot of their stability in their lives on what we know for a fact. And, I think it's cool not to.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I guess we need those people too. I feel like those are our engineers type people.
Yeah, but it's interesting. There are a lot of scientists in the hard, kind of professions like that who are able to completely understand the physical world they live in, right? The non-quantum one, for example, and still have a wandering and wondering mind.
Right.
And I would consider myself kind of like that too. I believe in medicine, and I believe in the cause that it has, and what we can do with healthcare. But I also believe that there's a lot more to it that I'm excited to understand if we ever are able to get to that point. I'm just always excited for what's next, I guess.
Fair enough. Okay. Before we sign off, last question. I'm going to put you on the spot. 3 books or people or videos that you recommend everyone go read or watch or listen to.
Gosh.
for the purpose of either understanding quantum things or for the purpose of understanding better health or whatever you want it to be. But 3 of your top
I
recommendations.
wish I had my phone with me because all my Audible books, I pretty much just...
Off the top of your head.
Man, anything by Deepak Chopra is awesome.
I agree. Okay.
Anything by, if you want to get more philosophical and just kind of like, feel good about your life, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Who?
Thich Nhat.
Okay.
Yeah. Amazing.
Not aware of that one.
And the last one, the one I'm currently reading, or actually just finished recently, which is a little more in the woo-woo zone.
Right. A little less like solid.
Yeah. Is called Real Magic by... he is one of the chief scientists for the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Which is what? Noetic Sciences. So that's a lot of like your metaphysical sciences.
Okay.
And he had fascinating, again, interestingly empirical, journal published, peer-reviewed articles and data to kind of explain to us how these quantum theories relate to the real world. And he talks about magic and, he brings it up at the beginning like, the first thing you think about is Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, like that kind of magic. But we're talking about it at an applicable kind of stage. Right. It has a bad connotation to it, magic. Magic does not equal science whatsoever. Right. But again, when you kind of start looking into and thinking about the possibilities of quantum physics, mechanics, theory, consciousness affecting your life and the physical world you live in, those things don't become so crazy. And it's just a really interesting, different kind of approach and perspective to have to, again, broaden your horizons about what can and cannot be possible.
Cool. Yeah. Well, those are your recommendations. That was great. Got like an hour of some really interesting conversation in. So thank you for coming by. Yeah. We'll do an update podcast at some point in time once you're further along your medical career. Cool. Love that. Thank you guys for checking in and catching this episode, and we'll have another one for you soon.